Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Digital Transformation Thursdays. This is officially our 20th, and we started this series to celebrate our 20th year as a law firm, and this is supposed to be our last because we said we'll just do 20. Instead, I think we will continue doing this as long as we are able and we can find interesting guests and topics, right, to discuss about the changes that we've seen brought by the advent of the internet and this new way of interacting with each other. And we have a very good episode today. And in fact, we don't have one; we have three. In the area of digital human rights, in the years that I've been in this space, one person really stood out early on as being a pioneer in this space, and that's our first guest, who is Mr. Al Alegre. He's been very active in this space, really focusing on digital human rights for many years through his group called the Foundation for Media Alternatives. They've been helping NGOs, enabling them, identifying issues, and he's worked a lot with different agencies. So when I said, let's do something on digital human rights, I reached out to him and we had a conversation, and true to form, Al is the kind of guy who has a good overview of the topic. But on top of that, what happened was we ended up not with one episode, but 3 episodes. And that's this, we call this the Digital Human Rights series here in the Digital Transformation Thursdays. This week, we will talk about digital human rights, or human rights in the digital sphere, and gender rights. Next week, we will be discussing data privacy and freedom of expression. And the week after that, we'll be closing it out with a discussion on the Open Access Bill, which hopes to improve the level of service for internet services in the Philippines. Okay, so just as for how do you call it, administrative purposes, as we mentioned before, this series is free. This webinar is free, but if you want an e-certificate of attendance, you must register on our Zoom page, and then you will be sent a unique link. And then we're asking you to make a small donation. We're making a donation in behalf of our COVID frontliners. We've already made our second donation. Our first one was to PJs, the second one to Balay Molave here inside the UP campus. We're very happy to do that, and it's not just a donation of the firm, but also the donation made by our speakers who have contributed their time and effort for free for this. So we'd like to thank them as well. One more thing, please let us know where you're watching us from. We'll do a shout out later. I know some of you have already logged on, and I'm pleased to note that it seems that I'm very modest ang goal ko lang. I just want to hit Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. I think we've hit that. But we'll do a shout out later for everyone. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and he's Mr. Al Alegre. He's a digital rights researcher and advocate. He's been doing this for more than 35 years, involved in development and social justice work. Since '96, he's been working at the nexus of human rights, public policy, and social technologies. He was, for a time, the executive director of the Foundation for Media Alternatives, and was involved in many national, regional, and international initiatives as speaker, resource person, research consultant. He joined the precursor of the Department of ICT, which was before known as the ICT Office, or the ICTO, under the Department of Science and Technology, working on strategic policies and programs. And more recently, he's been working with the Commission on Human Rights, with the Office of the Chair on strategic programs and digital human rights. I'd like to please welcome Al Alegre. Welcome, Al. Oh, nakamute ka.
Hello, good afternoon. Maraming salamat, JJ. Thank you for inviting us. I speak for lahat ng mga dinamay ko. When JJ called, we go back a long way, and he broached to me the idea of something like this. I guess it was part survival that it's very hard to discuss human rights and in the digital sphere in just one go. So I started suggesting names for possible areas, and JJ picked up on that, and uh, they now have a three-part series, which elates me because it gives us more time to do a deeper dive rather than what I will be doing today, which is really like a helicopter ride of the issues involved. Sort of to preface the whole series and to give everybody some parameters of how we are looking at human rights in digital environments. So it's I will be interchanging the terms. No, it's really human rights in digital environments. It could be ICTs, the use of computers, etc., but also the internet. And in many ways, in the internet is social media for many. So we'll be touching on a few things on social media. Um, some people term this as digital rights. We refrained from using that before because digital rights management was a very controversial term before. It was IPR related and enclosing content and knowledge. But it's now, I think, digital rights has become more accepted. Internet rights is also one term that has been used by advocates, specifically because we are all netizens, and what are our rights in that? If digital citizenship is part of our personas now as either digital natives, the younger ones among us, or digital immigrants. We are my generation. We are all digital immigrants. We didn't have the internet before. During martial law, we didn't have the internet and social media. So, but now we are deep into the internet, and if you look closely at when I joined FMA, I revived FMA in '96. The internet just came to the Philippines in '94. We are celebrating we just celebrated the 25th year of the Philippine internet. So so that's where we are, and I'll now share my screen. Mm, uh, can everybody see? Okay.
Looks good.
Yeah. Straightforward title: Internet rights are human rights. Locating human rights in digital environments. Mm, a very short roadmap will be just sort of contextualize what the impact of internet and ICTs have on human rights discourse, and then I'll go right away to emerging human rights issues in digital environments. I will try to sort of deconstruct and simplify a very complex topic because uh, if the internet is everything now in our lives, well, it's very hard to explain in 20 or 30 minutes uh, what the impact will be on rights on all these arenas. But I'll try. I'll deconstruct it a little bit. I have a typology which might help. I'm not sure if I can reach the third part, which is initiatives, efforts of human rights defenders online. But no problem. I can skip that part. I guess I've been using this slide for forever. I think I first used this maybe 12, 13 years ago, where we were explaining that the impact of the internet on all aspects of human life, no? Especially and particularly in this case on the concept and practice of human rights, since human rights are embedded in human lives, as Duterte would say. I will not get into definitions of human rights. We all sort of know it, but I stress this because uh, these characteristics of human rights, universality, inalienable rights, they are interrelated, interdependent, and indivisible, finds a specific significance in the digital sphere when you overlay technology, when you overlay a digital identity into everything. And as we will see towards the end, the complementarity of offline and online. So it's very hard to separate now the offline life and the online life. I'm sure everybody knows that intuitively, but we will try to show that in the human rights sphere. Why are internet rights becoming important now? Well, uh, firstly, it's really because of the advancements in technology and how it has enabled all of this. The first three circles are really what we were seeing maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that this was where it was going. Mobility, rise of smartphones, and then a lot of sensors and sensor networks and tracking and all of these things, and the rise of social media. Since then, since I was using this slide, there have been lots of advancements in the area of the use of algorithms and smart technologies and big data and the Internet of Things. Things we wear, our appliances, our watches, our refrigerators will tell us when we have milk. Our watches will tell us what our heart rate is. It's embedded in everyday things. And artificial intelligence, we'll not get into that, but this is a new frontier even for human rights advocates, because how to prescribe these new technologies in a topic, human rights, which had a very analog history. Yeah. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which incidentally is on its 75th year, was signed because of the horrors and atrocities of World War II and all the killings that happened and all the torture and the bombings, etc., etc. So, how to migrate this into new realities of digitization and computerization, and how that has embedded itself in all aspects of our lives is a key driver for this discussion. I'm going to deconstruct rights and the internet this way. Um, we used to divide it into the first two. First is the rights to the internet, meaning um, questions of access, accessibility for people with disability, and the very crucial affordability question. Who can afford to be on the internet? We'll talk about that a bit later, but it's the rights to the internet. Do we have a right to the internet? The same way that education has developed, that we now have a right to education. Then I guess the more easily absorbed concept is rights on the internet. Without the internet, we have rights. What happens when we have the internet now? So this is a clearer migration of your rights offline, your right to express yourself, to associate, the right to privacy, and your gender rights also exist in a virtual world. So we'll talk about that as a whole basket of rights on the internet. The third is something I've been developing the concept of. I don't know if the preposition is correct, rights in the internet. Because what we're seeing is there are specific rights related to digitalization that have not had not been sort of uh, contemplated by an analog reality. I'll explain it later, but for now, let's refer to this as extended rights that are unique to the technology that we are all experiencing now. So that's our, in a sense, our roadmap: rights to, rights on, and rights in. For rights to the internet, I think this is very clear. That's why I push that you talk also to Grace, because your third webinar will be on uh, a, 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 a law, a proposed bill that would seek to broaden access in a situation where the Philippines has one of the most expensive yet the slowest internet, not only in Asia but globally. Uh, but that derives primarily from the right to be digitally included, the right to meaningful access to the internet. If the internet is very important now, then what will it say if only half of Filipinos are on the internet? Especially in a time of pandemics. Half the world is still not connected. The affordability question, again, we work. Lisa continues to work with the World Wide Web Foundation and the Alliance for Affordable Internet. They have broken down the affordability question in many relevant ways, like how many days do you need to work to afford a smartphone, which will be your access device? And you will see that they have lots of data on this, and the data points to the fact that many still don't have access. A September 8th report says that before the pandemic, only half of adult Filipinos were using the internet. Which begs the question, in a situation where many are unemployed and without income, uh, and hunger rates are going up, how many do you think will prioritize internet over food, right? So I expect this number to be lower during the time of COVID. Well, there are lots of estimates about how many, but I think this is very telling. In terms of the right to the internet, it's been a process. I was in the World Summit on the Information Society, which was informally the World Summit on the Internet in 2003 and 2005. We were part of the Philippine delegation, and we were already talking about access because, of course, the Europeans and the Americans had access, but the Africans, the Asians, and the Latin Americans did not. So it was front and center on the agenda of that summit. And then as it went along, countries started to consider internet and connectivity and even broadband connectivity as a right. And even the UN Special Rapporteur acknowledged. In 2012, he said that it is not yet a right per se, but governments are being encouraged to make it widely available and affordable to all. As countries started considering this a right, many countries passed laws or even included it in their constitutions to characterize internet access and broadband connectivity as a right. And we have lots of national examples. In 2017, I think this is a milestone in terms of intergovernmentals declaring that the internet is, is like water, right? And we will have to move into a situation where it is an essential right for all. And this particular declaration was also coming from another reality, which was some governments were denying access to certain populations or at certain times, or certain regimes were limiting access. All of this was bubbling under the surface. And um, uh, so if for people who already had access, a deliberate disconnection from the internet was being framed as against international law. There is a whole community just monitoring internet shutdowns. So one aspect of the right to the internet is the rights of those who have no access. But there's also the rights of who have access, however limited that may be, but who are denied access in specific episodes or times or contexts. Um, so you have macro level filtering, like the Great Firewall of China, but there have been episodic shutdowns in many countries up to today. In Asia and Africa, Myanmar, etc. The number one, I've read that the number one country which has the most number of internet shutdowns in 2019-2020 is India. There is data about the internet shutdowns, and it's being so. There is a campaign, keep it on, hashtag keep it on. You can go into that. And there are different reasons. You can see that the reasons that have been studied are, well, public safety, national security, similar to how our government would frame if ever they would, heaven forbid, shut down the internet. But this brings me to, this is not just an issue of rights to the internet, but it bleeds into the second category of the rights on the internet. Because for the simple reason, and very simplistic reason, if you deny access to the internet, you're denying voice to those who are using the internet to share information, to share advocacy, to protest, to share knowledge, to do education. So it transcends into the rights on the internet. So the succeeding webinars will tackle this in a deeper. I will just helicopter on a few uh, um, current issues that touch on, let's say, freedom of information and freedom of expression. Unlike China or Bahrain or or India, we do not have wide-scale internet shutdowns. I think the tradition in the Philippines is like the tradition of media. It's basically not regulated after martial law. There is freedom. It's a freewheeling media, sometimes to its detriment. But it's very difficult coming from the martial law years to shut it down, because we've had that experience before. But what has happened is there is a history of technical filtering, like DDoS attacks or attacks on certain websites to put it down, etc., etc. We have documented that through the years. But in the recent past, we are seeing a different way that is also a trend in some countries like us, where legal regulation has been used, ostensibly passed in a democratic way by Congress. They did not shut down Congress. Congress is the one that passes it, etc., etc. But they are problematic from the traditional view of free expression. I will not go into these things. I will rely on Romel and Jam and all of the other speakers to talk about this. But just to mention the Cybercrime Prevention Act, because I was limiting my slide, but I wanted to show a slide I was using before on those who filed petitions against the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. And one petition was led by none other than Jesus Dicini, Esquire. We were part of a wide opposition against the Cybercrime Prevention Act, the Supreme Court, but it passed. And we are seeing now that some of its elements are problematic. And we've seen this recently in the Rappler case against Maria Ressa, when a private person, ally of the government, filed a cyber libel case with very flimsy reasons. Anyway, we'll not get into that. I'll flag that for Romel and the others in the succeeding. You can see certain things to regulate content, like the Bayanihan Act has an anti-fake news provision. Again, it's problematic because who decides what news is fake and what is not? And then the very controversial Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, which will surely be discussed by the next webinar. And it's not just content-related laws. That's how we call, let's say, libel or defamation or fake news or disinformation or all of these things are content-related. But lately, we're seeing in the ABS-CBN shutdown that the licensing and franchising power of the state has been used to shut down the biggest media organization in the Philippines. And it does not just deny 11,000 people work, but also entertainment for many people, knowledge, information in a time of pandemic. There are a lot of rights that were sort of violated with that closure. And then, yeah, we've had a lot of ink on regulation of content. That is a flag for freedom of expression advocates, because there are laws against harmful content, libel, defamation, whatever, if spreading, whatever, if you, the proverbial, if you shout fire in a movie theater, malabo yun, di ba? So, but even without the anti-terror law, there have been already arrests and using the problematic cyber libel provision. This is interesting. In August, SWS reported results on half of those asked agreed that airing or printing of government criticism was dangerous, even if the criticism was true. If you say something against how the government is handling COVID or how they are red tagging people, etc., but it is dangerous. This is the classic example of a chilling effect. And that's what we're involved. What is involved here. That most of these laws and regulations have the overall effect of chilling free speech. Instead of freely expressing one's opinion, uh, people will self-censor. The public sphere will be less open and free because there is a threat that you will be charged or held to jail. FMA was monitoring this because this was right after, I think, the Maria Ressa conviction, and these were people who were posting on Facebook complaints about certain companies which had poor service, and they suddenly received letters demanding apology for damaging Facebook posts. Chilling effect. The second area which I'll get into because it's very sort of relevant to the current milieu in the Philippines is disinformation. We all know what that is. It's a very toxic environment. Even COVID related, there is non-political disinformation, health assertions which are not true. There is long-standing historical revisionism of the martial law years and the legacies. There are hyper-partisan attacks online on public figures or politicians using fake news. Laila de Lima is on jail and partly because that there was this fake video of her having sex with her driver, which is totally fabricated. And with the technology what it is and developing the so-called deep fakes, it will be very problematic to distinguish what is a real content video, for example, or voice. So, and of course, if I have time, I'll get into the role of platforms. But to the credit of Facebook as the number one platform in the Philippines, number one social media, it has taken down various accounts, content sites, which has been deemed to be engaging in coordinated inauthentic behavior or CIB. I think there are three waves of takedowns. This is the second wave, I think. 2018, I know there was one. And then recently, links to China sites, China originating sites, links to campaign sites of Sara Duterte have been deemed violative of community standards and authentic behavior. So, of course, the military raised anyway. So, the third sort of example I would sort of look at as very relevant to the Philippine situation is surveillance. And we've had a trend of surveillance. That's why we were pushing very hard for a Data Privacy Act. It did not satisfy all our desires for a comprehensive, but it's a Data Protection Act which we supported. In fact, FMA was the first to file a complaint, which there was no complaint process yet then by the then Data Privacy Commission, National Privacy Commission, on the COMELEC leak of information of voters. Fast forward to now, to today, and COVID-19 is the reality which we all deal with. But as globally, it has been an excuse for governments and private companies to access personal information many times without consent or full consent, free prior informed consent on all that they do with our data, and using the health crisis to normalize a situation of an emergency, which we feel might be normalized even after the emergency, because the emergencies, we don't see the end of this emergency, no? So and in the middle of these things, there's the national ID system, which is FMA has good materials on the problems of the national ID system, PhilSys. And then this is also very, I will flag the national DNA database, which some congressmen are copying from other jurisdictions. We don't even know what our DNA says about who we are. But there are already moves to commercialize it. All of these services which you give your blood, they will take your DNA, so they will detect your pre-existing conditions or your proclivity to disease, etc., etc. It's been fantastic how much we are giving up our personal information to companies and states. Just this past few months, there was a multi-stakeholder effort by not only Philippine agencies and NGOs, but also regional, Asian, and also global, Civicus, Privacy International, APC, on the initiative of FMA to write a letter to the IATF asking for clarity and transparency on the contact tracing efforts that were being proposed and authorized. Awa ng Diyos, hindi yata sumagot formally ang IATF, ang DOH, ang DICT, at ang Multisys. Pero if you look at the petition, you will find out, the letter, you will find out what the concerns are when personal data is being required and there are no safeguards. It violates some of the privacy principles of proportionality, etc., etc. Anyway, so I'll try to wind down, because hopefully we understand the rights to the internet discourse and the rights on the internet. I'll briefly, it's a bit technical, but bear with me because we are all in the digital sphere. We have to know some of these things better. So I'm calling it rights in the internet. These are rights which have not been contemplated by usual human rights law or usual concerns of social justice, etc., etc., because they are embedded in how the technology works itself and what problems arise out of this and what should be a rights-based response. First is network neutrality. Think of it this way. There is free Facebook, right? Free Facebook, Facebook Zero, etc., etc. And they have made a deal with the telcos. This was my debate with Jim Ison long time ago. But we feel it was violative of network neutrality, which basically refers to if content passes through your pipes, you should not discriminate on what content you will allow and what content you will not allow. What content you will give a fatter pipe to and what content you will give a thinner pipe too. In other words, it's easier to download the content of Facebook because they have a deal with PLDT and Smart and Globe than it is to download a human rights website because they do not have that. They are not paying or they're not revenue sharing. So this has been raised by pioneers of the internet that the internet was supposed to be neutral. It's like a telephone wire. When I call you, you do not listen and say, what you will talk about is less important than what another person will talk about in another call. So that is what we call content agnosticism. You're agnostic to what content passes through the internet. And we have seen many, many instances where this is being violated by the telcos, by the platforms, by rich content owners. Okay. So I hope I clarified that. So network neutrality. So do we have a right to demand from providers that they will not, first of all, snoop on our content to be able to decide whether our content is worthy of a faster access pipe or not? So that's one. Secondly, this was famous for a couple of years ago. The right to be forgotten was filed in France. It's not that straightforward that the right to erase everything that's on the internet about me, because the internet never forgets, right? So if you posted a nude picture of JJ Dicini online and then you erase it, chances are it's still on the internet somewhere. It had been shared or whatever. And there was this landmark case in France on the right to be forgotten, which related to search engines. Let's not get into the legalities of that. But the point is, do we have a right to control what type of information? Let's say I was a drug addict before. And then now that's very hazardous to one's health to be labeled as a drug user. People get killed for those things here in this country. According to many, the numbers are upwards of 30,000. So, do we have a right to demand that search engines filter the content if it's irrelevant, if it's 19 kopong-kopong pa, etc., or not? So that's one. Do we have a right to be forgotten? The right to encryption and anonymity pertains to many in conflict or crisis areas where states are hunting them for what they do, human rights. So they have to communicate secretly or confidentially. So the internet has allowed this. There are a lot of encryption protocols, etc., and systems. But many states are trying to break this right by disallowing encryption over their networks. So it's a problem for human rights defenders because this will expose a lot of vulnerable people and populations to harassment and even death. And anonymity is also a debatable thing. People are saying that we always have to use our real name on Facebook and all our platforms. But again, if you are criticizing a government with thin skin and every post that you make is filtered and monitored and might be potentially a cyber libelous post, there are some contexts which anonymity might be the better part of valor. And there are many countries that have disallowed real name policies. Korea, the most connected country in the world, has been very strong on right to anonymity. The last thing I'll mention is, again, we are all on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I can't get into this, but the algorithms that are at work, the machines that filter our content and then process it and then decide what content they will show you. For example, based on your previous choices on what you see on YouTube, YouTube will suggest content, videos that you might like, or they may suggest videos that have paid. Add money. That's a big business now. Digital advertising. A recent study came out that about disinformation on martial law. LaSalle scholars, Che Soriano and her colleague, have studied how much the content that pro Marcos, pro BBM, etc., content is being shared by those site owners who are know the system of YouTube, exploit it, and use all sorts of manipulative behavior so that what appears on the search for martial law will be the fact that martial law was the golden era of Philippine history. And we were richer than Singapore, and Marcos had a ton of medals, and he was very rich, so he does not need to steal from the Philippines. Anyway, this demand has been raised that the algorithms are like black boxes, which we cannot see how these things happen. And there have been many studies in many countries where it has been proven that there are very discriminatory algorithmic decisions, either on blacks or colored people, on women, etc. There have been a lot of books that have come out on algorithmic discrimination. So, in this new milieu, should we have a right to know how the algorithms are interpreting our choices? And that's exactly what Cambridge Analytica did, no? With Facebook. They manipulated the systems of Facebook and the algorithms of Facebook so that and gathered a lot of personal information so that they can shape the content that they will now um, make viral. So these are, again, to recap, these are new extended realities of the internet where new rights may have to be developed in some sort of national or global consensus. And many of these relate to data. We are our data. People have tried to get it. It's the oil of the 21st century, data. So all of these platforms and social media companies are personal surveillance mechanisms to be able to get our choices, our what we want to shop for, our religious or political options, etc. And then market. I'll end with this series of slides to see how complex it has become. I broke it down so we can simplify it, but now I'm trying to reassemble it and to show the complexity. So now freedom of expression was very clear. Article 19, all of these things, UDHR. But if you overlay technology with freedom of expression, so am I free to express if the platform will censor or filter my content depending if they believe that I should have a thicker pipe or I pay? Is paid, will there be a tiered internet where those who pay will have a faster internet and those who do not pay cannot pay? So isn't my right to freely express affected by that, by net neutrality or the lack of it? Of course, connectivity. How can I express my freedom online if I'm not connected? So COVID is exacerbating the digital divisions in society, the divisions in society, by exacerbating the inequalities, digital inequalities. Privacy, privacy rights. If I know that I'm being surveilled, will I be as free to express my real opinion or not? Of course not. And security. If people will hack into my accounts, why will I continue to be on Facebook? I'll just leave Facebook because they will spoof my identity and my account and they will send all sorts of harmful content in my name. Uh, anyway, that's where I'll end. Internet are human rights, and I'll skip this. Maraming salamat. Thank you. Sorry for going over time, I think.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Al. Thank you. Let me see. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Al. A lot of things to think about, and I think it's a nice preview to what's coming up in the next few weeks. We'd like to call now on our next speaker, who is Lisa Garcia, and she's the executive director for the Foundation for Media Alternatives. She's a graduate of UP with a degree of sociology. She also has a master's in international relations from Kiev State University, as well as an MS in Women and Development Studies from the University of the Philippines. She's a board member of the Center for Migrant Advocacy, a co-moderator of the Internet Governance Forum, Dynamic Coalition on Gender, an editorial board member of Good ID, and a fellow of the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. I would like to welcome Lisa Garcia.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, JJ, for the introduction. Okay. And yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Al for giving us an overview of what our rights are to, on, and in the internet. Okay, let me just share my screen with you.
Good. Kita na pa.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Again, Al has given us already the context of our rights to, on, and in the internet. But what I will be discussing with you is the gender aspect of it. Why do we have to discuss gender matters when we talk about issues, when we talk about our rights in the digital environment? So that would be my objective. And for that, I will be focusing my discussion on the digital gender divide that exists. Okay. But first, let me start with, of course, I would like to start on a positive note for all of us women when we talk about the issue of the internet. There are already, sorry, what has happened to my, sorry, my slide has,
I think you need to share again.
Yeah, I'm sharing it again.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, it's there. Okay, there are many women actually who have helped change technology as we know it, and a lot of them are women who have contributed a lot when talk about the development of the internet as we know it. Of course, there's Ada Lovelace who proposed the mechanical general purpose computer, the analytical engine, which served as the precursor to the modern computer as we know it. Grace Hopper, who worked on the first commercial computer in the United States. Radia Perlman, whose work is about the algorithm behind the spanning tree protocol, which is crucial when it comes to the foundation of the internet. Hedy Lamarr, an actress who might be familiar with some of you, who worked with George Antheil and developed a radio guidance, some sort of frequency for the jamming during World War II. And if you saw, of course, the film Hidden Figures, you would have become acquainted with the African-American mathematicians who worked at NASA. So, and a lot more women actually contributed to the development of the computer as we know it today, even the codes that were developed, because earlier computer coders were actually women. Sorry, let me go to, okay. I don't know what's happening. Sorry, my computer keeps on going to this slide anyway. So if you look at the computer, actually, the vision when the web was invented, I'm not talking about the internet, but when the web was invented in 1989, the vision for the web was to be an open space where everybody, all people can create and share knowledge to harness the talents of people and to enable collaboration. That is why when Tim Berners-Lee of the World Wide Web Foundation now developed the codes, he made it available royalty-free, and people were able to develop eventually based on the codes that he shared with the world. And as the contract for the web says, it reiterates actually this vision that the web should bring people together, make knowledge freely available, and change the world for good. In fact, it has, of course, changed the world for good and improved the lives of billions. And then, yet, when we look at the internet, many people are still unable to access its benefits. And the web comes with too many unacceptable costs, according to the contract for the internet. And if we look at the internet penetration by region, I borrowed this slide from Hootsuite. We can see that in the region, there is actually there's still billions of people who are unconnected. And it is if you look at Africa, the regions of in Africa and also South Asia, that is where a lot of people are not connected, and a lot of them are women. Now, there is stark gender disparity when it comes to economic and political realms in the offline world. For instance, on the average, women would be getting 20%, earning 20% less than that of men globally. And for instance, in the Philippines, when we talk about women comprise half of the country's total population, but according to the Philippine Commission on Women, women only hold about a fifth of government elected positions. And even in digital development, many women and girls are still being left behind. I think Al mentioned this in his presentation earlier, that men are actually 21% more likely to be online than women. And for least developed countries, this rises to 52%. And data from the International Telecommunications Union actually suggests that it has increased between 55%, but by 55%, I mean, between 2013 and 2019. We also know that many are accessing the web through mobile phones. In fact, if you look at the figures in the Philippines, there are uh, um, more people using mobile phones than laptops or desktop computers. But global figures from the GSMA, or the Global System for Mobile Communications Association, show that there is actually a gender gap in the use of mobile phones. There are 300 million fewer women than men who access the mobile internet, and women are 8% less likely than men to own mobile phones. And this is a figure that I would like to share with you to show that in the different regions, actually, you can see here the number of men and at least the percentages of by population of men and women who use the internet. And really, in least developed countries, you would see that there are less people using the internet and less women, actually, less female using um, the internet. And when we talk about, and this is what we call, this gender gap is what is also called the gender digital divide. So this is the gap between the number of men and women who use the internet. And this actually reflects the inequalities between men and women in how they access the internet and in how they use the internet as well. But some people would say, no, it's not true. You know, in some countries like the Philippines, there is actually uh, more women use the internet than men. Actually, there was a study by the social weather stations. I think that was in 2018, and even FMA did a study in 2015 that showed that a lot of women, there's almost parity in the number of men and women using the internet in the Philippines. And this uh, slide, again from Hootsuite, shows also the social media usage of Filipinos. And you will see here that more women, a little more, than men use the social media than men. And it is really young people here who are the users of social media. But um, but given this figure, we cannot generalize. We cannot say that women are equal than men when using the internet, even if there are more women um, using the internet. Women don't actually enjoy the same opportunities than men when it comes to using the internet, even if they are more in number. And across the world, that is so because there are barriers actually to women benefiting from the internet. And these are as follows. Number one would be the time. There have been researches done on this. Even in the Philippines, women would say, I don't use the internet because I do not have the time. We know that women are busy doing household chores, taking care of their children, cooking, and sometimes even helping out, earn an income for the family. So that is one barrier. That's why not a lot of women are able to use the internet and benefit from it. And of course, the availability of access, even if there's broadband access, maybe it's not that strong. If there are public centers or spaces where women can access the internet, sometimes it is very far and they cannot go to that place. The infrastructure also plays a role here. The service might be poor if it's not available, or if the quality of service is not good, then people are not enticed to use the internet. So, and then of course, the issue of affordability. Do they have enough money to pay for the data? Because data in the Philippines is not cheap. we're in Southeast Asia. I think we're one of the more expensive when it comes to the cost of internet connectivity. And the device as well. I'll show you that graph on how many hours or how many days you have to work before people can buy a device. And it is also a function. If you don't have a device, then how can you connect? The next one is about relevant content. So here, language plays a big issue here. If you don't understand the language, then you're not enticed to read the content that is available. So government here can help by, providing the vital services that are available and online, and also making these services available in a language that is understood by all, especially by women. And then is there content that speaks to what women want? Are there information available on sexual and reproductive health, on their legal rights, on digital finance, etc.? So those are um, uh, things of interest to women. And if they are not available, especially on government websites, then you don't uh, uh, you don't go to that website. Culture and norms also are barriers to women's use of the internet. In some societies, even here in some families in the Philippines, boys are prioritized when it comes to technology. And the issue of online gender-based violence um, uh, is a barrier here. Also, it's part of culture and norms. If you think that if you are being abused online, and or you fear that you might be abused online, then you shun away from using the internet. If you're not um, being allowed to go out, if you don't have internet at home and you're not being allowed to go out by your family uh, to a place where there is connectivity, then you also are not able to um, gain from the benefits that are there. Then the other barrier is lack of skills, capacity and skills. Uh, some women have said, "I don't know how to use that device. That's why I will not use it." So that's why they are not able to connect to their families and friends. And then women's participation is important here, um, especially in decision making. Um, Not a lot of, it's not just in the Philippines, but globally, there are more men actually who are in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. And that's why when you look at um, the um, the policies, the devices that are available, the services, the platforms, they are not sometimes designed with women's needs in mind, because mostly it is the men um, who are designed, since they are the ones who are in technology. They design uh, what should be there. So yeah, and then there are also forums that look into policies that would benefit women as well. But sometimes women are not invited when crafting policies. And this says a lot about the policies that come out. If the voices of some sectors of society are not heard, then it is skewed towards other voices. And then there's the issue of safety and security, especially women, especially if you have experienced being threatened online, if you have experienced some abuse or harassment online, then you shun away from using a certain platform. So that is important. So these are some of the barriers that studies have shown that make women that's why there is inequality when it comes to the use of men and women of the internet. And I would just like to highlight this issue about online gender-based violence, because we talked about safety and security as a barrier. Now, for quite some time now, the Foundation for Media Alternatives has been mapping cases of online gender-based violence in the Philippines. So we've been following actually media reports on such cases. And during the pandemic, we have seen an increase, actually 30% increase from last year in the number of cases that were reported, online gender violence cases that were reported. So if you look here, it is also young women, those below 30 years old, who are usually victims of online gender-based violence. And if you look at if we go back to the slide on the use of social media by Filipinos, you see there that it's also this segment of the population, this age range, where there are more users of social media. And they are also the ones who are being targeted, who are also being attacked online. So these are cases like using your photo or a video of yours and posting it online without your consent. These are cases of doxing, using your identity. These are cases of extortion, like sex videos being used. If you have, let's say, a nude photo or video, and then you and let's say you break up with your partner, and your partner didn't like it, and you have a video or a nude photo or sex video with him, then it's possible for him to share that or to extort money, so he won't share it online. So those are things that are being reported, and those are the things that we have actually recorded in the map that we have. So, and not to mention that there are actually threats, hate speech that are happening. And when it comes to women, it is actually, they are being attacked because they are women. It is because of their bodies. For instance, some journalists would be attacked, like women journalists. People would tell them, "Oy, pangit, kahit pangit ka, sana ma-rape ka." And that does not happen when you talk about male journalists. So when women are actually facing this harassment, this online, they experience harm. And what we have, and when we looked at it, the types of harm that women are actually facing include emotional harm, which is very high, psychological harm. There's also financial harm, because when there's something that is negatively posted about you, then sometimes you lose your job, or you're not accepted in a job, because there is like there was it refers also to reputational wise. So there's reputational harm as well. And sometimes because of these videos, even physical harm happens. What is online is transformed offline. Okay, so when we talk about all this, the barriers that we talk about, when we talk about the harm, the gender, what does this actually mean? We know that the internet we have today is not really working equally well for men and women. From the gaps in the quality of connectivity that we talked about earlier, the digital skills, the threats, and the disproportional impact on the safety and rights of women and girls. And this all prevent women from fully benefiting from the opportunities that digital technology offers. And the gap, the online gap that we saw earlier, this means that women are less likely to participate online, both as consumers and as producers of content. And when women are not able to participate equally online, then they are denied their talents, the skills, their perspectives, and knowledge. And research has actually shown that when women actually gain access, and not just access, but meaningful internet access, and if they are able to participate in evolving knowledge society, then it is not just the women who actually benefit. their families, their villages, their barangays, their communities, and their country also gain from the empowerment that they have. That's why promoting internet access for women is more than just actually an issue of gender equality. It is also a part of the economic, social, and political development of countries in which women live. And then the United Nations have actually recognized that access to the internet um, is critical to individual and global development. And actually, there is a SDG 5 talks about achievement of gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. And this includes a target to enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular ICTs like the internet, because they have realized the potential, of course, again, of the internet to advance women's equality and empowerment, not just for this SDG 5, but in other uh, goals as well, in many of the 17 goals that were identified. Okay, so what can how do we respond to the barriers that were earlier discussed, and how do we close the gender digital divide? Now, the World Wide Web Foundation's Women's Rights Online Network, of which FMA is a part of, had actually identified policy steps that countries can take to close the divide, the digital gender divide, and this is through the REACT framework. And this, which urges policymakers to immediately take action on issues that focus on rights, education, access, content, and targets. Um, I think I don't know if I still have enough time, but yeah, so I'll go fast here already. So when we talk about rights, this means protecting and enhancing everybody's rights online, ensuring that the web is a safe space for women and that fundamental rights and freedoms are protected, such as freedom of speech, privacy, etc. When we talk about education, studies have shown that education is a powerful tool to close the gap. Um, when we talk about access, we've talked about it earlier in the barriers. Of course, affordability is an aspect here. It's a major obstacle to access, and we have to work on that. We talk about content. We should ensure that there's relevant and empowering content for women that is available and that which they can use. And policymakers, government should set targets that are measurable, those that would meet the needs and demands of women. This would include having targets in our national broadband plan, for instance. Did they even mention gender there? So I don't think they did. So anyway, there are other initiatives that are being done so that gender equality can be achieved in digital space. And this is important because we all have a stake. So if you look at the contract for the web, I don't know if some of you have or your organizations have signed this. This encourages governments, companies, and citizens to work together to design and encourage approaches and interventions that prioritize inclusion of everybody, especially women, so that everybody can realize their potential and be part of um, the discussion that is going on in the digital space. Policy is very important, having a gender perspectives when you talk about gender perspectives in technology policy are crucial because they acknowledge that men and women are socialized differently. And as a result, we should understand this policy's impact on men and women differently as well. Women are not homogeneous group, therefore policies should consider their experiences because they come from different social economic backgrounds, ethnicity, age, etc. Yeah. Among civil society organizations as well, There are campaigns, platforms, movements, hashtags that raise women's rights aware issues and concerns. For instance, the Take Back the Tech campaign, which FMA heads here in the Philippines, is being done every year to reclaim women's rights in the internet to end gender-based violence. At the local level, of course, we have other initiatives, the Mantay Bastos initiatives, Babaya Ko initiatives, and they also raised women's concerns, especially on issues of safety and violence against women. Yeah, let me end with saying that, by saying that, yeah, with COVID-19, having access to the internet, of course, has been more crucial than ever. And to be offline means that we are missing a lot, especially on learning, earning, accessing valuable services, participating in democratic public spaces, public debates, and the digital divide between people who have internet access and those who do not, who do not, could be deepening under existing gender inequalities. And this may further push women further to the margins of society. So we need to, we know the potential of the internet to advance women's equality. So we have to tackle these barriers that were discussed earlier, as well as the gender gap, in order to improve our societies, our economies. And I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's see. Well, oops. Okay, what did I do? All right. Thank you for that. Hold on. Okay. Can we ask Al to maybe I'll do a shout out first. Thank you for that presentation. I'll do a shout out first, I guess, for the people who are here. I said I'd shout out to the people who are joining us. So we have participants, I think Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. We even have somebody from Las Vegas. So from Trinidad, Benguet, Kawayan City, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, La Union, Pangasinan, Lucena, Quezon Province, Subic, San Fernando, Pampanga, Bulacan, somebody in UP Diliman, Quezon City, Marikina, Makati, from government agencies, PAGCOR, Commission on Human Rights, COA, DOH, PTAC, DBM, NCR, Pasay City, people from Pasay City, Moonwalk, Parañaque City, San Mateo, Rizal, Cavite, Bacoor, Las Marinas, Cavite, Santa Cruz, Laguna, Lucena, Bicol, Daraga, Albay. Our fans from Dr. Emilio Espinosa Senior Memorial State College of Architecture and Technology in Masbate, Cebu, Zamboanga City, Malaybalay, Bukidnon, Davao. Welcome to everyone. And I'd like to ask Al and Lisa to turn on their cams, and we'll go to the Q&A. I'd like to thank you both for participating today. Very important. I wish we had more time so we could discuss it, the issues that you've raised. Very interesting questions. I'll ask the question. I think although I think it applies to both gender issues and human rights in general. And the question asks in relation to the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In the later, towards the end of her life, she became a celebrity. She was known as the notorious RBG, and she passed away a month ago, I think. But her replacement at the Supreme Court has already been sworn in. When she was younger, she was a lawyer for the ACLU, I believe, and she brought a lot of cases pushing for equal treatment of women. And she did this in sort of
Increments.
How to call it, incremental, incremental push. In fact, in one case, as mentioned by the person asking the question, that she argued a case in behalf of a man who was denied a caregiver deduction because of his gender. And the question is this: do you think this can be done in our country when moving for greater human rights or removal of gender discrimination? Or will it be less effective? In other words, does it make sense to bring this fight to the Supreme Court?
I'm not so sure. There are strategies, of course, in how you fight the different cases. Anyway, we can bring issues to court, and and that could be discussed, because it's good if you have actually faces, if you put a face on a case, so people would understand it better. But sometimes that may work. Sometimes it should be through legislature, but when we talk about having laws here, if it is something that would pass through Congress also, it would take time. So I would understand why she was doing it, because maybe that was easier. But we're talking of the U.S. legislature here. I don't know in the Philippines if that would be the case as well. But it would be good if we can test it as well. I don't know about legislature. It takes, especially when it comes to um, uh, laws or bills that for women, gender-related bills, for instance, the reproductive health bill. It took what, more than a decade or almost decades before it was passed. So how much more? If we, sometimes we can't wait. That's why sometimes we pass laws that are not really, that great. We still have questions on them, but then somehow there is that semblance already of protection. So I don't know, maybe that strategy can work for us, hopefully.
Yes. That's interesting. A few days ago, or maybe sometime now, the Supreme Court issued a ruling under the Violence Against Women law, the anti-VAUSI law, which was essentially, it was an individual who had engaged in an extramarital affair, and the court said that since this resulted in psychological harm to the wife, that this individual was in fact convicted of that crime. So I think anti-VAUSI is one example where the route has been done through the legislature. There have been challenges to that law, but the Supreme Court has been very, very supportive. So it might, I think, as a lawyer, I think it might be possible to move things along that route, but I think you would really need to have very good cases. We have to remember that, what was her name? The lady, Rosa Parks, right? The lady who refused to stand to sit at the back of the bus. That she was not the first one that the suit was brought by the ACLU, and she was in fact the second. And the first one, the reason why the ACLU, they brought the suit, the reason why it got no media attention was because the first case that was brought involved I think she was a single mother. She was a single mother back in the 50s. So there was that moral aspect as well. So fighting that fight in the courts and in the media, you need to have a sort of a very clear case, a clear-cut case. So you need to have a very good plaintiff, so to speak, and then you need to have someone that's sort of media friendly. But I have a question for Al, because there are all these issues brought by the internet, and I like the fact that you have discussed is rights in the internet, which I think what you're discussing there is similar to cyber crimes. Right? There are crimes that are committed in the real world that happen on the internet, but we just apply the old law. But there are crimes that can only be committed, right, using a computer. And so we have this new category, and maybe this category can be called cyber rights. So cyber crime, and then maybe cyber human rights. My question is this. Now, there is a bill now that's being considered by Congress called the Internet Transactions Act. We had a webinar actually about it a few weeks back. And one of the things that Congress is considering now is directly regulating, or trying to have some regulation over internet businesses that are done, and I think this is the start of a trend, not just here, but I think in other countries as well, where we're not going to go the route of China. We're not going to lock out the internet and have our own local internet, but local regulators are going to say, wait, we want to be able to control that. And I wonder whether that would be a good start, getting Congress to care about rights of individuals, and then introduce those ideas in legislation following that model. I was wondering whether you had any thoughts on that.
Sige, JJ. what I'm getting on that is this is a regulatory question. So,
Yes.
and I think the we are in the still in the very early stages of figuring out what regulatory framing will work for the very fast developing internet space. Okay. I'll link it to the previous question. So, strategic litigation will will ask the questions which need to be answered on constitutional and legal grounds. No? So I think there should be a section of rights holders and their advocates to go that way. Strategic litigation, the way, for example, Sina Romel, when they did writ of amparo on a drug victim na
Right.
sinubukang patayin. So it's a Supreme Court, but that's an important case because it will open up many things about. Anyway, so yung sinabi ni Lisa din about strategic legislation and legislative reform, importante din yun. So you have to have advocates in 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 the Supreme Court. Obviously, RBG was an advocate for human rights, so for gender rights. So she was a champion. We need champions for these rights. So we need champions to advocate progressive interpretation of the internet in not limiting its potential for sharing and for knowledge and for business and everything, but at the same time be very protective of that it does not do harm and it does not violate either traditional rights or rights that are emerging because of what you're saying, cyber reality. Okay, I go to the regulatory laws and jurisprudence is important, but it's important who implements the laws, right? So therefore, we have a privacy act. It also depends on how strong the National Privacy Commission is to implement that act. The case we filed on the Comelec leak, I don't know. Nagkalimutan na dun. And all of these things that Facebook is doing, they said they will. My point is, if your regulatory framework is weak, it will also be a detriment to promoting rights. But there are different regulatory framework. I believe in on the internet it should not be a hard regulatory. But again, we're early stages. My last example is Facebook. Facebook, how does one regulate Facebook? Meaning una, private space naman yan, dapat hindi regulate. I tend to believe otherwise, that may public interest sa mga lahat ng ginagawa nila. So my approach is, una, we have to call them out on privacy issues, right? So if they're violating. So that will need a good privacy regulatory ecosystem. Okay? A strong National Privacy Commission, civil society pushing, maybe strategic litigation, etc. Okay. But Facebook also has to be called out from an antitrust perspective. Are you using your market power to influence the market unfairly? To not allow small players to come? Are you that's the whole point of the DOJ hearings now in the States with the big four, big five, GAFAM.
Right.
Are they exercising their bigness as big tech to prevent competition to truly thrive? If I'm an apps developer, if I do not play ball with Apple and Google, I will not be, so So Facebook and other platforms have to be regulated from an antitrust perspective. Okay.
Right.
There is also a disinformation uh, regulatory. So if Facebook is becoming a platform for all of this disinformation to be weaponized and to be viral, there has to be some content related, and I'm not sure how it will be. There's a Facebook oversight board. So I'm doing that intro to say that Facebook is trying to do a bit something. There's a Facebook oversight board which is testing a new form of regulation, semi-self-regulation, co-regulation with an independent. Because I totally respect all of those who were chosen. Many of them I know. But again, Facebook has limited the scope of what the Facebook Oversight Board can adjudicate. So again, so what I'm saying is, in this complex, the regulatory frame, first of all, should be autonomous, di ba? I mean, there is so much regulatory capture in this country. So that's the first problem. Secondly, we have to be innovative and creative about how to regulate for the public interest big tech, big tech. Okay, and it includes taxation. I'm on the fence about internet taxation. Honestly, with these big ad tech companies that are coming up, I really don't know if it's a if we leave them to we, to their own devices and not do any taxation on that business. So I'm open to that. Well, and just briefly, the platforms mag-election, di ba? So we're looking at how the platforms, like let's say, political advertising on platforms. Mag-election
So, so,
tayo.
so, so, so you raise up a bunch of problems with platforms, and I'm thinking, if government says, right, passes a law that says, okay, Facebook, you have to locate locally, you have to set up an office here, you have to, because let's say the government says your mass media, you have to be 100% Filipino. So you find somebody local who would be the Facebook or your representative here, then you can engage in that activity. Then these issues that you're discussing, it's easier to lobby because they will now be subject to Philippine courts. They will now be subject to regulations by regulators. So there's that aspect as well. Or are you concerned that that might not be a good way to go?
Uh, there are some issues which may be resolved that way, but I think I'm more for more co-regulation, multi-stakeholder bodies, more innovative, deliberative ways in which these new forms of engagement and harm are sort of looked at. I'll give you an example. There there are private, public, private, government, civil society partnership which are trying to come up with both an ethical and an operational framework for AI, for artificial intelligence. There have been many meetings and many groups because they can't get their head pa around this very new thing, and they will not, I agree, ipapataw lang na, o sige, dapat the usual, di ba? Register kayo,
Right.
ilalim kayo, ganun, ganun, ganun. I believe yun nga eh. We have to be creative in this new arena. And it will be a mixture of state regulation, maybe,
Mm. Yes.
maybe self-regulation, the way media will do it, and co-regulation and deliberative democracy. How can we talk about this? So ako yung reaction, counter reaction ng Facebook Oversight Board, o binanatan ng Facebook, nag-create ng board. Oy, okay. Teka, parang kulang yung ginagawa nyo dyan eh. Now, I think Maria Ressa is part of an international panel that they're calling, I know informally, a true Facebook Oversight Board, which they will now look at the issues that Facebook doesn't want its own FOB to deal with. And I think that's also important because we have to,
Okay.
in other words, speak truth to power. I guess that's it. And
No,
regulatory
yeah.
mechanisms are levers and tools on how to do that. But we cannot just rely on the old. We have to reinvent things. Yun lang.
Yes, yes. Very interesting. Actually, I don't know if you remember that John Travolta movie, A Civil Action, which
Hmm.
involved toxic tort suit, right? There were people, I think, in
And by
New
environment.
Hampshire, whereas environment, the water got poisoned. And so apparently that lawyer, he said the mistake was bringing the lawsuit. He said it was a mistake to bring the lawsuit because what happened was when you bring a lawsuit, you lose the ability to engage in discussion with this wrongdoer, which is the company. And what they needed was they needed these guys to work with them to clean the environment, not necessarily a financial solution, which is what ended up happening. They ended up paying the plaintiffs kasi nag-settle sila. But hindi na-solve yung problem that they wanted the environment clean. So I think that's what you're saying as well. Now, it's not necessarily a confrontational approach, a strong regulatory approach may not give us the results that we want because it's a fast-moving industry.
Pwedeng light touch.
Right.
And I think your
Yeah.
environmental example is very instructive kasi there's also a lot of thinking around like climate is it's such an extraterritorial reality, right? Like the internet is. It has big players, but the mechanisms that are seem to be working are a mixture of dialogue in terms of the COP, but also protests, right? Dissent and local laws. Local laws, not necessarily federal or national laws, but municipal. So it could be a mixture. The point is let's learn from these. And from the start, the internet in the World Summit has always uh, se- uh, has also been regarded as multi-stakeholder to. Wala namang alam ang gobyerno to. Huling-huli ang gobyerno dito parate, di ba? So it's the private sector. So it's also the technical sector, the technology, the techies, etc., the entrepreneurs. But yun nga for some of these obviously harmful practices, lahat natatamaan. So when small entrepreneurs are being shut out of the big platforms because of monopoly behavior, then those are potential allies of internet rights activists, right? And so I guess that's it.
Lisa, um, what's this? I was turning this question in my head. There's actually a question here about that case in Cebu about the all-girls school where some girls took pictures of themselves, posted it on the internet, and then the school prevented them from graduating. This, of course, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the questioner is asking whether you consider this an attack on women's rights, because I think there was a morality call there, no, on the part of the school, basically saying that what they did was something that was, as far as the school was concerned, did not satisfy moral standards of the school. That's why they were not permitted to graduate, not permitted to march. They did graduate. They were not permitted to march. Yes.
Yeah. This is actually the first jurisprudence, the case when it comes to privacy, even without us having still a privacy law during that time. There are a lot of things to consider here. Number one is you have this school that has its guidelines. And when you enter a Catholic school, sometimes they ask you to sign that you abide by these rules of the school, that you're not supposed. I come from a Catholic school when I was from elementary to high school, and you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to wear this, otherwise there will be sanctions. And that was where the school was coming from. But the way that they got the information, the photos, when the way that they accessed the photos of these girls, I don't think that was right, because of course when the ruling of the Supreme Court says that you can't really expect a semblance of privacy if you are on social media, because unless that is a for if for personal use only. That is your setting is private to yourself alone. But then, is that an issue of morality? Well, if the thing is that the girls, when they posted the photo, they were wearing swimsuits. They were on the beach. You can't wear a uniform in the beach. Of course, if you're on the beach, you have to wear your a swimsuit. So what's wrong about it? It's just that we have different standards, and they were um, uh, and since this is a Catholic school, they do not allow that. And of course, that is a question. That's why right now I was thinking, if that case happened at the time that we already have the Data Privacy Act, I do not know what the ruling of the court would be.
It's interesting. Interesting.
My point,
Yeah.
my dagdag, JJ.
Mm.
Again, yung inamin nung ponente ba o nung na nagdesisyon na hindi siya maalam sa social media, but he was ruling on something. I guess my point is this: there has to be capacity building on all levels of society about digital society, and the legal ecosystem also must catch up with that. And I know you've done a lot on that level, but if Supreme Court justices will decide on constitutional matters on social media privacy without knowledge or experience on that topic, magkakaroon ng problema, di ba? So, tama, wala pang DPA noon, pero mali nga ang paggamit. Ang ginamit yata ng ibang ay yung habeas data. But anyway,
What was available then? Habeas data.
Pero yun nga, I think this is part of the growing pains of a legal and regulatory environment which is now being forced to go online more with the pandemic, etc., etc. But not only in a mechanical way or in an operational way, but also to understand the issue. So therefore, I think one is to have all of these MCLEs about data privacy and internet rights, which maybe the CINI law can start. We're trying to start that with human rights in CHR, that UP will run MCLEs on human rights law, etc., and international law. But we are in the cusp of a really transformative era.
Yeah.
And with pandemic, na yung so-called digital transformation, your own title connotes that we are in this time when we have to transform. But as we all know, our institutions and our culture has to catch up. And hopefully, from a human rights perspective, no one left behind, rights-based, the least harm on the most number of people, etc., etc. So hindi pwedeng national security lang o militarist response lang. Pati nga health ginagawang military response. Right. So anyway.
So I'm so it's interesting because I think I don't know, my sense of human rights in our country is that I think Filipinos on some basic level accept that their personal, individual, civil rights give way, right? They're willing to bend their personal and civil and political rights in favor of a larger good. So my example is Filipinos never question whenever they go into a mall that they have to open up their bag and basically give up their privacy as a prerequisite to entering many public places. I've never heard anybody complain, wait, I have a right to privacy, you have no right to look at my bag. Because they understand that their safety is also at stake. And I'm concerned that moving on to now in a pandemic situation, will people give up privacy rights to say health information, in the name of fighting the pandemic? So these compromises. Actually, the other one that we're seeing, I think, and maybe we should be troubled. No, one more recently, of course, is the rights of people who are suspected of committing drug crimes. So all of that was sort of, I think, pushed under the rug and somehow did not affect the president, because I think people felt that their feeling of safety in their communities somehow have to give way to the rights of these individuals. And I think that's, in a sense, what's happening now in relation to all this red tapping that we've seen, and the task force that the president has set up to fight communists. Sorry, what was it? I think it's a national task force, right? To fight the left. And I think my sense is that where the president is coming from is that I think people feel that there's this that their personal and civil and political rights have to give way to a larger good, which is perhaps safety and feeling safe and having a secure environment. Maybe not in the metropolis, and maybe this is why in NCR people don't understand this in a way that people in the outside Metro Manila react to these issues. Do you think there's a disconnect between that? Because I feel like there's a disconnect between the urbanized areas where we reside and those outside. And I think the president somehow is able to communicate more effectively to those outside.
But may trade-offs talaga. Safety, security, and di ba, health,
Yeah.
etc. We always have trade-offs. And it's more stark now with the pandemic. And I think, yeah, privacy rights may have to yield at certain times to health considerations. That's the whole point of health surveillance, contact tracing, all of these things. But again, there has to be a high level of trust on who handles your data and how your data is handled. Okay, and that the rules are there so that it will not be abused. It will not be normalized as an emergency situation, but will do mission creep to all other areas of life. And that's what advocates are saying. Of course, we're not against contact tracing or but with the absence of a rights-based protection framework, hanggang kailan nyo hawakan yan? Pag hiningi ba ng military yan, ibibigay nyo? What covers that data sharing, etc. Will you destroy it after a certain time? Diba? Who has access to it? Diba? All of these things are not discussed, but only the big picture. You have to sacrifice your rights for the greater good. But we don't want to pose it as an either or. It can coexist, because if you sacrifice your right to privacy, for example, for your right to health, without the proper safeguards, you will end up losing both of them. Diba?
Yes, yes.
Diba? Kasi pag makuha na yung datos mo, lahat na pwedeng gawin ng whatever, ng malevolent actors with your data. And not just the pandemic will be the source of harm. So, balancing act negotiated in a pandemic. There are rules that will be interesting to discuss in the next webinars in the Jam at kina Romel, because
right. I have a question for Lisa. So my understanding is that the Philippines has one of the highest. Am I right? We rank perhaps in the top 5 in the world on gender equality. Is that true, or I'm misinformed? We rank high up.
Lower na, bumaba na.
So we're at top 10. So we're top 10 on gender equality. They say something. I've heard this said that it's because of language. Our language is gender neutral. You say ikaw, you don't say, well, anyway, siya, hindi he and she. But what I find when you look at the internet and you look at the way people react, as you said earlier, right? How people react to women expressing themselves on the internet, the level of violence that men spew out, yung ma-rape ka sana, right? I've seen that actually. I've seen that we represented this lady who spoke out, and then just the comments are so violent. Yes, and I'm wondering, how come? Is there really gender equality, or is it is that the true Filipino? Maybe the surveys are wrong, or do you think that's just those are just trolls and they're just magnifying this parang gender what we call hatred or gender discrimination?
I think when it comes to that, yung sa ranking on gender equality, they have criteria for that. And that would include the number of women who are occupying political positions, for instance, in government, those who are working in managerial positions, etc. Women here are allowed to vote, etc. But those are just some of the criteria. So I suppose there are still some elements that are not actually captured. You might even say that we have laws. We have many laws for women, but when it comes to implementation of the laws, we're very poor at that. We just submitted actually to the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women about what was happening about domestic violence in the country during the time of the pandemic. And there was really an increase in the number of cases. But are those actually being captured when you have all these surveys, this ranking that they do? Sometimes they are not being considered. So that's why when they say that the Philippines ranks high up there, but how do they actually treat women? How are women treated? Are they actually respected here in the Philippines? If you have a president that says, ay, okay lang na ma-rape ang women, whoever rapes them, then I will absolve them. So what does that say about gender equality in the country?
Especially when you see a crowd reacts the way that they react when that is said, because he does say this in public.
Yeah, they
so
would
it's
laugh,
a like
they would clap.
correct. So and sorry, I just want to pivot a little bit, because one of the concerns I think that has arisen in the quarantine, the ECQ GCQ, is this increase in well, I think it's probably established by now, increased incidence of gender violence, right? And I'm wondering whether you've seen any. I mean, what have there been effective measures to address these concerns? Because I mean, I guess the courts are not fully open. I don't know if the police are able to rescue these women, and so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this problem.
Okay, of course, reporting would be good. You have the barangay desks, and that would be helpful, because in every barangay there's supposed to be a desk, and they should not be concerned only with COVID, because there are other issues happening in the community as well. So having online reporting platforms would help, of course. The hotlines would help. Information that is available online as well. Those would help, so that of course the courts are closed, but then you also have to raise issues. And the other thing is women speaking up. I see a lot of young women being very vocal about their issues. You have this students from this Catholic high school who started speaking about the discrimination in their school, the sexual harassment that some of them are experiencing. You have celebrities who are talking about their experiences, and that is good. We should talk about these things because these are really happening, and we should do something about them. And that is also one way of educating the public when you speak up about these issues.
Well, it's interesting you said that. I'm just a final question to you, because just a light bulb moment in my mind. I was thinking the Me Too movement, right, that happened in the US. I didn't see that happen here. It didn't roll out the way that it did in the US, where people got called out, careers got destroyed. Somehow that didn't. I'm wondering, maybe I'm not paying close attention enough, but I never really saw that sort of barrel through and destroy people the way that it did in the US. Why do you think that that's so?
There were some who were publishing, posting in the Me Too, something similar to that. Well, even the Me Too movement, it did not pick up the first time that it was launched in 2016. It was only recently when it was picked up by the public. You also need, I was saying champions. You also need maybe celebrities to endorse that, so that um, you know, the more people are speaking up about it, maybe um, people will catch up. Yes, that also happened to me. And when you talk about in Twitter, I was telling you about this case of high school students. They started it. It was a different hashtag. Um, um, MCHS can do better. I think that was the hashtag. Yeah, and then somebody started telling her story, and then eventually other students started also um, saying their stories, and eventually other schools as well followed suit. So the thing is that it was a different hashtag for different schools, unlike in the US that it was just only one hashtag. Perhaps
Me too.
yeah,
Yes.
just me too.
All right. So we're out of time, and I'd like to very grateful to the both of you. But I'd like to give you a minute or two if you'd like for some closing remarks. Would you like to go first, Lisa?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, JJ, for inviting us here so that I like the discussion, and then the participants are actually very active here. Yeah, so it's nice that we were able to talk about issues related to our rights online. And but when we talk about these issues, we also have to consider the gender implications of these issues. Sana, we're not talking about, I hope that there would come a time when we don't talk about, okay, we have to insert gender issues, because it is something that has to be embedded already there, because we have to realize that men and women are not the same. They're different somehow. And when we talk about equality, we both have to benefit.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, maraming salamat din sa inyo, JJ, at sa mga nakinig at nagbabalitaktakan sa chat. Maraming salamat, interesante. Ako na una magpa-plug na may mga tanong na hindi nasagot, pero medyo sadya yun kasi maraming tanong nyo baka masagot sa mga susunod na webinar. May on privacy rights at on freedom of expression. So, ibaon nyo yun, tapos I guess i-document ni JJ. Ipapasa nila sa next relay, yung si Jam at saka si Romel. Ako, ganito. Dito sa internet, katulad ng like any other social phenomenon or system or institution, may nakikinabang, may hindi. Ang gusto natin is lahat makinabang pantay-pantay. Of course, medyo mahirap yun kagad, pero dapat yung ating mga balangkas, sistema at proseso ay nakaangkla dun sa paano natin bibigyan ng pagkakataon yung mga walang pagkakataon. So, doon pa lang sa internet at sa digital transformation, kalahati ng populasyon hindi makakasabay. Paano sila? Okay. Sa mga nandyan merong mga mahalagang mga boses at dapat, I think, again, what I said, speak truth to power. There are powerful forces now online. And I think it's the job of human rights defenders and advocates to speak truth to power if they are overstepping their bounds, of if they're taking advantage, if they're causing harm. And that, sa akin, human rights is that way. Ang ano ngayon, we cannot distinguish na what is offline, what is online, di ba? What is Philippine, what is foreign? Is Facebook private company or public space? All of that is blurring. So we have to engage the technology, number one, know more about it. I learned a lot in that webinar on YouTube, and because I found out how YouTube's algorithms work to push up the pro-Marcos discourse. And again, we have to be aware of that if we are to counter disinformation or historical revisionism, as an example. So engage the technology and know more about it. Be active participants. Use your voice. Use your agency. But don't be afraid to leave it. To leave the technology if it doesn't help you. You know, it's a toxic environment. Leave it. And have other venues where you can express yourselves and your advocacies without being beholden to those who control the situation now. So, internet rights are human rights, and hopefully we are all human rights advocates at the end of the day, di ba? For yourself, but also for your family, the next generation, your community, and the nation. Maraming salamat sa lahat.
Maraming salamat, Al, and maraming salamat, Lisa, for participating today in our Digital Transformation Thursdays. The first of our series on human rights. These are very important topics. As you can see from the passion that we hear from the closing statements of our guests. I feel comforted by the fact that they are there, that they are here, that they are fighting for these rights, that they are thinking about protecting Filipinos in a situation where I think not enough people are actually giving much thought and attention. So in that sense, the work that they've been doing, I've been watching from afar, but I've been observing the work that they've been doing. This is important work that continues to be relevant, and even more relevant as we go deeper into this new world where data. They like to say data is the new oil, but then people like to point out, what did oil do except create pollution? Apart from creating energy as well, it comes with the good, and there's the good and there's the bad, and I think people like Al and Lisa are part of that group that want to say, okay, oil is good, but let's ease up on the bad things that can come from that. And on that note, I would like to close this session. And I hope to see you next week where we will be talking about data privacy and freedom of expression as part of our human rights series. Thank you.
Salamat.
Salamat.